Hello everyone and welcome back to SGTV. We are back in the SGTV studio with Mike Page from Residual Current and the Loadout Warehouse. So it's finally good to have someone actually in the studio and not doing this over Zoom. So as some of our audience might know, we've already had Mike on the studio talking about the different parts of the industry and the job routes you can take. So Mike, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. So we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of the different industry sectors. But before we get into that, let's just, for those of our audience who don't know you, can you just tell us a bit about your background and how you got to sort of where you are now?
Yeah, I'm 25. I've been in the industry for about 10 years, working in all sectors for quite, decent amounts of time. So I think I've got quite a good perspective on them all. A couple of years ago, I started sharing my day-to-day online, and it's gained a bit of a following. I've recently started YouTube as well, and a tool shop, which you guys are helping me fit out at the minute. So yeah, lots going on. But yeah, just happy to be here, happy to be doing content with you.
And you've reached the pinnacle of your career now, joining us here
Yes,
at SGTV.
yes.
Okay, so anyway, let's get into it. We're going to do a bit of a quick fire round on the pros and cons of the industry. So, domestic. Let's start with the pros.
Pros of domestic, you'll learn a lot because I think, you'll be working for yourself or working for a smaller company, a lot less corporate, a lot more, down to you. You could work locally, you could pick your own hours, and once you know what you're doing, it's relatively easy work. Not to dumb it down, but, it's quite a tight sector, I'd say.
Cons of the domestic sector.
Cons is, not speaking for myself, but some electricians look down on domestic electricians. You have to deal with a lot of DIY,
repairs.
Yeah. You're working in people's houses, so furniture, hoarders, not everyone lives how you like to live, and you're going to be in other people's homes. So there's that.
We're talking that like hoarding show.
Yeah,
that's kind of environment you end up working in. Yeah.
Social housing, all sorts of stuff like that. And generally, if you're in the domestic sector, most people in there are working for themselves. So obviously, you've got that whole dynamic of, running your own business, the stress of it all, and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's the cons for me.
Okay, commercial. Let's start with the cons on commercial.
Cons on commercial will be long hours. You'll be working for a bigger company, still maybe on a self-employed basis, so you might not be treated, you might be on a 0 hours contract or on a day rate.
So you're talking no holiday, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's that. Generally, especially down south, it's city work, so you're going into London, tube, long commute, parking and walking in and stuff like that. And you can easily be just another number as well. So there might not be a lot of progression on a commercial site with hundreds of guys and 20 electricians. You're just going to be another number, one of 20 electricians instead of working your way up a company or something like that.
So pros of the commercial sector then?
Pros are, it's probably the most varied sector, I'd say, ranging from office fit out to showrooms to, small warehouses and sort of the heavy commercial stuff. It's a real varied sector. So you can do anything from fire alarms, sockets to, big supplies, fuse boards, whole buildings. It's a real varied sort of, sector. I think it's probably the most varied of them all. So if you get into it from, at the start of your career, I think you'll be quite a well-rounded electrician by the end of it. The money's quite good. If you're good at what you do and you can, hold your own in the commercial sector, I think you'll be paid well for it. And again, just the experience. I know a lot of people that work in the commercial sector for someone else and then eventually go out and start their own company, and there's probably more money in that than going out on your own domestically. So yeah, that's another pro. You can learn how things work and how to run bigger businesses than sort of a one-man band domestic outfit. So yeah, that's definitely a pro.
Onto industrial. So what would you say the pros are of the industrial sector?
Industrial, the pros, I'd say you'd probably be the most respected out of all the sectors, I would say.
In terms of knowledge, experience, that kind of
Yeah, if you was in a, if you was at a bar with 3 electricians and 1 domestic, commercial, industrial, you'd probably be the most respected, I would say. Not that
we're going to have commercial and domestic
Yeah.
installers on the comment section now.
Yeah. You will generally be paid quite well if you think of industrial sectors, because there's subsectors, but like complex, so oil and gas industry or explosive atmospheres, rail, all these sort of things, water industry, they're quite specialist, they're quite niche. So you're going to be paid well for your expertise. And I would also say it's probably the most enjoyable for me, the industrial sector, just because, it's high voltage or it's remote pumping stations or, big cables, big supplies. Instead of doing sockets in a house with a bit of T&E, you can be doing some really interesting stuff in the industrial sector. So motors, all that sort of stuff. So that's the one I enjoy the most.
What about the cons of the industrial sector?
The cons would be long hours, out of hours, working remotely, all that sort of stuff. It's not the most, not every town has a pumping station or, somewhere for where all the gas is stored and stuff like that. They're generally, you've got to go where the work is. Same with like rail and all that sort of stuff. You've got to go where the rail is, So you might be working away, you might be working long hours because it's, more time efficient to just do a longer day, stuff like that. You have the same problem with being another number potentially. More so, you could easily be just a guy that does containment all the time.
So it could get a bit monotonous.
You could be an electrician, but all you seem to do is put up tray work because you work for a big industrial company that does kilometres of containment every year. So that can happen, but you can break through that by working hard, I guess, but you can fall into that too. And again, just generally, you'll be a subcontractor and you'll be working, on a 0 hours contract or self-employed basis. So there's that as well. But yeah.
So that's quite a varied response then of the pros and cons of 3 sectors within the industry. Which would you say is your favourite, your personal favourite?
My personal favourite, like I said before, would be in the industrial sector. Okay. Big cables, big tools, doing stuff which some people may find intimidating. I mean, it is at times, but there's always someone that knows what they're doing if you don't. There's training there and stuff. But yeah, that is the one I prefer and get the most enjoyment out of. Do you think,
but because you've got so much experience and you're getting so much knowledge from the industrial, that's almost, whether it's subconsciously, giving you the sort of tools and knowledge to think, okay, as I get older and I might want to be doing things less physical, I could go into different sectors and almost wind down a bit.
Yeah, it does. I think if you were if you were an industrial electrician for 20, 30 years and you just went into the domestic sector, I think you'd struggle just because it is so varied. So I think, that would be really hard. You would know a lot, especially about distribution and, work ethic and stuff like that. But, the finer details of navigating a house, dealing with domestic clients and that sort of thing, I think is like the other end of the spectrum. Okay. But yeah, you'd be, if you spent most of your time in industrial commercial, you'd be a more rounded electrician and more suitable for stepping into other sectors, definitely.
And which would you say is the hardest physically, the most hardest physical work out of the 3 sectors?
It's tough, but generally I would say either industrial or domestic. It really varies. If you're an industrial electrician and you just go around testing and commissioning, it's going to be quite, light duty, pen pushing and stuff. But if you're an industrial electrician that, installs massive power supplies, that's going to be big armoured and, very...
tough to pull through, aren't they, that kind of thing?
So that'll be very intensive on the body, but the same with domestic. You might just go around doing EICRs and testing, or you could be rewiring old houses where the walls are rock solid and you're chasing out every day. So but the toughest, you have to work for your money domestically. Generally, because you're working for yourself and it's down to you, one-man band or something. So I'd say domestic probably is the hardest.
What about, which is the hardest, not physically, but mentally? And I mean in terms of you having to think about what you're doing.
Again, it's a tough one. It really is. I'd probably say industrial, just because you'll be dealing with complex systems, motors, and that sort of stuff. But a lot of that thinking can be done for you as well. You know, there's industrial work that's generally drawings, schematics. You're working for a contractor that's worked all of that out, designed it all for you. As in, when you're in someone's house, that's down to you, which I think obviously leads to stuff getting done wrong, but also a lot of the time stuff getting done right, because you know, you design the system, you pick how you want to do it in someone's house, and you can make your life easier or harder. But yeah, it's hard. But I'd probably say just as to put a label on it, I'd say industrial is probably more technically harder.
Okay. What about money? Everyone likes money. So, what would you say pays the best?
Just for your bog standard sort of getting paid for your skills, I would say industrial. Just because if you're, you know, qualified to work on HV, or if you've got a good reputation in the water industry or something like that, you're going to get paid for your skills. And it's quite a ruthless industry, so I think if you can do well in it and garner a good reputation, then you'll get paid for it. But if you want to work really hard domestically, you can also earn a lot of money.
Yeah.
So
I know a lot of these questions I'm asking.
Yeah.
It could be quite open-ended depending on
perspective.
What... Yeah.
And also, if there's any electricians watching, I don't want to, you know, say one thing when it is perspective.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, this is your perspective from the positions you've worked in with the industry. And as you say, like with the industrial one, you might be the one having to think about where everything goes. You might have that done for you, so that would depend on where you are in that company. And the same with domestic or commercial, really. You could be going in, someone else telling you exactly what to do. If it's your business, you might be the one having to think about everything, where things are going.
And there's big domestic companies as well, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Not all one-man bands and stuff, so there is that. But, yeah.
What about longest hours? So, from your perspective, from your experience, which sector has taken the most out of you per day?
Commercial, I would say.
Really?
Yeah.
It sounded a bit bitter with that one.
Yeah, it's just working in London, you know, so you want to do an 8-hour day on site, you've got an hour to or from London when traffic's good, but generally it's about 2 hours, if not more, so that's a 10, 14-hour day, and you only get paid for your 8 hours, but if you divide that across the 14 hours, you're then sat there thinking, well, I'm actually on less, you know, so there's that sort of thing. And yeah, commercial clients can be quite needy, especially when it's, you know, the last week of the job and it needs to get done and they're moving over or moving in, they've got furniture turning up, you know, you might have to pull some silly shifts to get it done. So yeah, the one I don't like the most out of that, from that perspective, would be commercial.
Okay.
The hours are silly sometimes.
Well, I mean, this might be the same sort of question, but what about travel? Which one involves the most travel?
I would say industrial. Just going back to, like I say, not everywhere's got a pumping station full of water, or, you know, there's not warehouses full of explosive powder and stuff like that, or, you know, petrol filling stations and stuff like that. There's not one in every village compared to, you know, commercial or domestic sort of premises. So yeah, you have to go where the work is, especially if it's quite specific. So oil rigs, for example, you've got to go, you know, there's not going to be one at the end of your road. So yeah,
there is actually. Where I live, there actually is. But anyway, what would you say is the most diverse?
Probably industrial, probably commercial, I would say, actually. Because yeah, you've got obviously commercial specific sort of applications, but you could have a commercial premises which has flats above, it has a you know, a plant room which has got quite a lot of industrial kit in it, not, you know, the far end of the spectrum, but it will have lots of industrial plant in there. And then yeah, it could have a load of shops in it too, so that is a commercial building, commercial job, but you're actually tapping into various, you know, other sectors just in that one premises. So yeah, it's definitely the most varied.
Okay. What about qualifications? So obviously you're going to need your basic qualifications when you come out of your, whether it's college, apprenticeship, however you're doing it. So for each sector, are there specific qualifications that are going to require more out of you?
There's not specific ones, and lots of, depending on who you're working for, they all take a different stance on it. But I would say industrial's definitely you need the most qualifications for. There's more specialist qualifications required if you want to specialise. commercial's quite forgiving, and domestic is you obviously should be qualified, but it's largely unregulated, so you can you don't even have to go to college. But yeah, it's all, it all varies. You generally need a gold card for most site work, which is most commercial industrial stuff, and then you may need, if you're testing work and stuff like that, they'll want to see your card, they'll want to see the relevant qualifications on the back. And then if you're doing something like working in a complex environment, you'll need that qualification. Or if you're working on a commercial or industrial solar system, they'll want to see that you're competent.
And that's what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just for the sake of, let's think of a qualification. It's all down for safety and competence, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And they just heavily regulate it. A lot of it is, they want their insurance to be validated and stuff like that. So they'll want to know who's installed it, what they're qualified to, what system they've installed, whether that meets the relevant standards. And it's just because you're working for a company that wants it insured, they want it all above board. And just want a proper job doing. So it can seem, like you say, quite restrictive, but it's generally there for a reason.
So that's been quite an overview on the different sectors and your perspective from your experience. And I think that's very valuable for people to watch, knowing from other people's experience what they could expect in different sectors of the industry. So I want to thank you for coming on, Mike. And as I said before, it's nice to have you here in person. I know it's been a long time since we've been allowed people in, so it's definitely nice to sort of get back to some normality, and it's always a pleasure to have people like yourself come and join us.
Thanks for having me.
And as Mike mentioned earlier, we are going to be going over to Mike's studio at some point soon for a tour and some videos, so make sure you look out for that one. So anyway, thank you, Mike. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for watching. Please make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification button below, and we will see you next time.